expunged. Nothing is done to this guy. He had a criminal record to start with. He's in the country on illegal grounds. You have falsely and illegally allowed him in. He commits a crime against a child. He's not prosecuted. It's expunged. In November, get this. In November, Ibarra files an application for employment authorization. And unbelievably, on December the 9th, 2023, it's approved.
It is the Martha Zoller Show, and I'm here with Chandelle Summer. And, you know, I think we're in agreement kind of really what we're saying related to Iran and Israel is that Iran is a paper tiger. Israel's going to keep fighting. And if we're right in the United States, because I think there's some things that are right and wrong and not left and right, and it's the right thing to do to continue to support Israel.
Well, Israel has better air defense capabilities, according to the experts that I listen to, and slightly more, they have nuclear capability. Iran does not have nuclear capability. They want to have nuclear capability, but so far it's been stymied by all the other countries who don't want them to have nuclear capability. So I think, Israel is in a better position, and I don't have any problem with them doing whatever they need to do to defend themselves. I mean, sending how many rockets did they send last weekend into
3,000 or something like that?
That's if that happened to the United States, do you think we'd be saying, don't worry, we're going to hold back because we were able to thwart the attacks?
Take the win.
Yeah,
we'll
take the win. This is why we don't win, because that's our definition of winning.
You know what? I interviewed Wesley Clark years ago, right after he was head of NATO, and he was thinking about running for president. And I asked him a question. I said, the guys that were the protesters, the Vietnam protesters of the 70s are now the people that are running for office. And he goes, that was the turning point. He said, it's not to say everything we do is right, but it was the turning point of people in public office feeling like they could be anti-American. And you can't be anti-American. You can have different points of view, but if you want to lead this country, the goal should be what's best for America, not what is going to destroy America. We're going to take some phone calls at 770-535-2911, and we'll talk to Joe in LJ. Hey, Joe, how you doing?
Martha, as usual, great show. I just want to say a Fox News poll just came out. Trump is now ahead 6 points in Georgia. And the great friend of you and WDUN, Steve Moore, told me about 6 months ago, he called me, he said, Joe, we got to win Georgia. If we win Georgia, Trump will be the next president of the United States. Martha, we're going to win Georgia by a landslide. He's ahead in Michigan. I just saw these new Fox polls. I think it's going to be a landslide simply because Trump wants to cut my taxes. Biden wants to raise them. Martha, I'm not the smartest person in the world. But any politician that wants to raise the taxes of Joe McCutcheon, I never vote for. So for voting for Trump for Joe McCutcheon is a very easy thing to do. And so I'm fired up. I've been on about 10 talk shows, including your great one, telling everybody that I think Trump's going to win a massive landslide, and I'm going to stick to that. But I love your show. Keep up the great work.
Thank you so much, Joe. Appreciate it very much.
It's early, and he is now about to enter into his first criminal trial next week. Certainly the best position for him in terms of all of the cases I think that are out there is this one. It's not really a felony, in my opinion. It's maybe a misdemeanor. And I don't know whether being convicted of a misdemeanor versus a felony means a whole lot in terms of his electability. And of course, everything is a persecution of Trump, and everything is couched in terms of the political environment right now, and it seems to be helping him. So we'll see what happens after these trials.
It looks like, to an average person, a persecution. I mean, it is. Look, I'm not the biggest Trump fan in the world, okay? But it does seem a bit like piling on. And you're not the only lean to the left lawyer I've talked to that have said what you said. My friend Lisa Wexler, that lives in Connecticut, that's a probate judge and a lawyer and a Democrat, said that it just seems like she says, I think the law on the case related to all the money he had to pay and the bond, the law is just, it's a misinterpretation of the law. And so I've heard from a lot of lawyer types, no offense, you know what I mean, that are all over the spectrum, but several that lean left.
No pun intended.
And they've all said, that's right, no pun intended, but they've all said kind of the same thing, that this has gone too far. And also you can point to cases on the other side where there was no prosecution and hasn't been any prosecution. And if you bring it back home to Fulton County, okay, and there's going to be a primary related to Fonnie Willis here in a few weeks, she's got 14,000 felony arrests that haven't been indicted. She's got 4,000 rape kits that haven't been, adjudicated the way they should be so that they could maybe lead to some charges. There are lots of day-to-day crimes to the people in Fulton County that nothing's being done on, and she said she could walk and chew gum at the same time. If I'm running against her and she's got two opponents, one from the left in her primary and one for the right, and they're both attacking her with the same plan. So I think the people of Fulton County and the average person in America wants lower prices. They want to be able to go to the grocery store, fill up their car, and they want to feel safe.
No doubt that Fulton County right now with her position as district attorney is not being properly represented. There are, like you said, rank and file crimes that need to be prosecuted that have been backlogged. She got a bunch of money from the legislature to handle the backlog, used it instead on this Trump prosecution, paying her boyfriend, and then travel the world with him. Once a month, they're going here. The next month, they're going there on the money that he's being paid, partially. So I think she's done a terrible job of representing Fulton County. And I hope
there were such high hopes for her because of the one they had before.
Well, she was ostensibly better than Paul Howard, and Paul Howard there were rumors that he was involved in extramarital affairs with employees and things like that, and she made a big issue of it. So it's kind of a little bit of egg on her face in that regard, but I could care less about her personal relationships. I care about the money. And when you're paying your boyfriend $750,000 a year to do the job that you could have 4 lawyers highly competent doing, I got a problem with that. But that has nothing to do with the merits of the prosecution. The prosecution itself is politically motivated. It's motivated only by the fact that it's Trump. And anyone else, they would not have brought a RICO action for this type of behavior, for challenging the election in a way that is unconventional and possibly, a theory that is untested and maybe even antiquated because it's been done before. But to prosecute the entire crowd of people who she has chosen for this RICO action, which is a highly complex, highly complicated type of procedure anyway, and use the taxpayers' money on that, to me, does not, it doesn't inspire confidence in her ability to make good judgments.
So there's a lot of issues around this. And, of course, the audio we heard coming in was Senator Josh Hawley at a committee hearing with Alejandro Mayorkas, who was not removed from office this week. He was impeached, but he was not removed from office. But what I liked about what Hawley did is that, the president in the State of the Union's called I don't want to call him Mr. Ibarra, the murderer of Laken Riley, an illegal, I think is what he said. He didn't say illegal immigrant. Then the next day he apologized and caused him undocumented. What Senator Hawley was doing was laying out all the documentation that they had on this man leading up to the death of Laken Riley. Okay. And, up to and including getting a work permit, which I'm not saying that immigrants should not get work permits. I'm not saying that. But this guy had had trouble with the law leading all the way up to this. This guy had shown that he wasn't going to follow the rules leading up to him applying for this work permit. So what are the rules for a work permit? I don't know. You would think you should not be a person who has criminal activity in their past if you're giving them a work permit. I would think. I don't know. But I'm also saying that he had a lot of documentation. We knew who this guy was, and we knew that he was a bad guy, but we let him into the country anyway.
Well, I think there's degrees of criminality. I mean, if he's charged with fishing without a license.
We're not talking about that here, though. This was child abuse. This was, first of all, he had gang activity in his background. Shouldn't have been let through initially at the border because of that. But he was waved on through. That's the thing. I don't mind being compassionate about immigrants. I don't mind that at all. What I do mind is this come one, come all attitude. And we had John King in here earlier this week, who in one of his last assignments, he was assigned to the border. He was a long-term military guy before he became insurance commissioner. And, you know, he was at the border with the Navajo Nation a number of years ago and then went back right before he got out of the Army. And he said the differences just in those few years were unbelievable, because there's a place where the wall ends. And what was happening, men were just walking around to the end of the wall and coming around with backpacks, camo on, military-age men. Now, granted, in fairness, most of the people that do come first to work are men that come first to work, then they bring their family. But these were not your typical worker types. These were guys that looked like military.
Well, I think anytime you have a tragic, violent death, you're going to
say, what if?
It's being used as a political tool for the position that we've got problems with the border and that there's people in the country who shouldn't be here. So I have a problem with exploiting her death for that cause. I don't know if her family does. I don't know if other people do. But personally, I feel like it should be focused on the fact that this was a violent attack. And that could have happened whether this was an American citizen. It could have happened whether it was somebody who came over on the Mayflower. That's the tragedy of the situation.
I get that. But what I will say is that the good news about what the Congress is doing is that they got a big bipartisan vote on the bill that was passed called the Laken Riley Act that had to do with it. If you interact with somebody that's done a felony, then they should be deported. Basically, that's what it said. Obama did that. He deported felons. It wasn't a crazy act.
That's already pretty much the law.
He got bipartisan support. But he can't get the Senate to touch it, and he can't get our Georgia senators to touch it. And we have got to stop. The Senate is really our problem right now, because they function so much more as a caucus than representing the states that elected them. And I've written about this. If you go to Access WDUN on the staff blogs, you can also find it on my Substack, where I have lined out what the problems are with just being a caucus senator. Sometimes you have to be your caucus senator. Okay, sometimes you got to vote with the caucus, but sometimes you got to vote your conscience. Sometimes you got to represent your state. And all they're doing is getting behind Chuck Schumer and voting yes every single time. You may not like the people that vote no all the time, but sometimes voting yes all the time is a problem too. We'll be back.